So we've been working with Devry for approximately 5 years, mostly in a consulting kind of arrangement. And Deb, I'll let you, if you want to give people a little bit more context about what your role is, besides being the HWIC.
HWIC.
The head woman in charge.
Wow, I'm impressed. Wow, that was good. Well, thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. I'm Deb Bennett, and as you heard, I do play a role at Devry Education Group, which actually we were Devry Inc. until recently. We are now Devry Education Group. And I have been with Devry for 8 years, and I oversee all and anything to do with academic technology for all of our institutions, which now are global. And for those of you who may not know, we are the largest healthcare provider of healthcare professionals in the world at this point. And we can talk a little bit more about that later if anybody's interested. But anyhow, I oversee academic technology, and that encompasses a lot of things. It encompasses mostly virtual environment of software delivery for our students that has to do with supporting our academic needs. And we host an environment, we have several environments actually, that we support over 150 plus applications that our students use all over the world to support labs, whether they're in our campuses or they're used online.
So by show of hands, how many people actually attended or graduated from Devry?
Wow.
So quite a few of you.
It's great.
So since I know when I went to school a couple ages ago, you know, technology's changed, the way people and students come and access these applications have changed. What did you see over these last couple of years? What was the business driver and requirements, and how did that shift and change? What were those requirements as it got into the desktop as a service conversation?
First and foremost, Devry started about 10 years ago considering how they could deliver a better experience to the students when it comes to supporting the curriculum. And obviously, when Devry was Devry Institute of Technology, we had a lot of need to use technology. And now we've become more of a larger university supporting more business programs and, as I said, healthcare. However, what we've done is we decided to move from an old way of thinking and moving toward, obviously our driving force here was mobile devices. And 10 years ago when we started this project that actually we had gotten some advice from RKON on, actually it was 10 years ago, not 5 years ago, we needed to find a way to deliver information to the students through a virtual environment. And with the introduction of devices today being brought into the campuses, it's anytime, anywhere. It's not just at the campuses anymore. It's not just if I can find a PC or a laptop to sit down at. I've got to be able to run it on my smartphone. I've got to be able to run it on my tablet. So that was the overwhelming driving force, even recently, to even take the step further into what we're doing.
So, and I'm going to move into one topic, and then we can move into Chris and Todd talking about the technology and why we chose some of those technologies. But obviously, what was once you decided a direction, there was the next part of your decision tree, right? Which was, should my internal IT staff be using and building and administering this, or why outsource it? And there were some valid reasons why you've shared with us. If you could share that with the audience, that would be great.
Sure. Devry has a very, very large IT organization today. Unlike it was 8 years ago when I joined it, there were about 50 people in IT. Currently, worldwide, we're over 600. And, you know, in IT in general, I've been in IT for 30 years. And obviously, there's always those factors of, do we support it internally? Do we externally send it out? And we've been through that whole gamut. And as we've grown as an IT organization, obviously, it's gotten more and more complicated. And IT, not unlike other organizations, IT organizations, we have complicated things by buying tool after tool after tool. The shiniest tool we can find, we have it. You'd be hard pressed not to find it at Devry. Does it work well? Sometimes, sometimes not. Is it complicated? Yes. Is it hard to keep staff, to keep it running? Yes. So as we began to grow, what we did realize was we needed to simplify this process. And so therefore we were looking for a partner who could actually help us oversimplify it so that we could bring it back down to the bare basics and then begin to build it out properly for the new environment and the new type of student we had, which was demanding, you've got to deliver it to me on whatever device I want to carry in my wallet.
And part of that simplification process, so these students come in and hit the RKON system, and we have a federated Active Directory back with the corporate, so the students only have one username, one password that they can use for all of DeVry. So it's seamless for the students. When they are hitting the RKON system, to them, they believe they're hitting a DeVry system. What are some of the other pieces from the value recognition that you're getting that DeVry is seeing, whether it's for internal IT, for you as the business, for the students? What are some of those value recognition that you've gotten out of this process?
Well, obviously, the more complicated it became internally, the harder it was to support. And unfortunately, for IT, for academic technology to sit inside of IT, that's always been somewhat questionable. This group that I support and that I lead only worries about the student experience. So we don't look at IT like the rest of IT looks at it. And IT specifically works on the business systems. So it's been a challenge internally to get the right staff, to get the people to support it, that we need to support it, and for it to be raised to the level to get the recognition it needs to get not only the support staff, but the funding to do this. So our biggest business partner in the on the business side of things, obviously, is academics. And now we have, I think, close to 11 institutions within DeVry Education Group that we have to work with, and we have to figure out what type of strategy they want to use and what type of technologies they want to use based on their pedagogical needs. So in that case, that's where we headed.
So I'm going to shift over and I'm going to ask Chris a question, and I'll pass the microphone. So first, Chris, when we're looking at what we've built, before we get into that, can you explain the theory of relativity for the audience, please?
Let me mess up my hair like Albert Einstein first.
No, I think what would help people, so obviously there was a process that we went through when we had to sit down with them and understand the requirements and what are the applications, and working with Deb and the faculty and understanding what those needs were. If you can explain the process that we went through with people.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris DeMichael. I'm Director of Advanced Services at RKON. Basically, my team is the one that was tasked with figuring this out, right? And actually, it's kind of interesting because Deb mentioned that you were looking for a partner to simplify things, but you happen to choose the absolute most complicated application set possible to try to deliver like this.
And why was that the most complicated application set? Give some people the context of those.
Well, so you guys started basically, because obviously you're not IT per se, but you're from the students and the academics, and you chose a class, right? I forget exactly what the class. I think it had something to do with it was 3D modeling or video game design, was it? Or
it's the graphics and simulation programming.
Okay, it's the it's extremely high end applications like Autodesk Maya, 3D Studio Max. What else is in there? There was like 5 applications that are all just like the biggest, hungriest, nastiest applications that you could possibly imagine, right? So, I mean, you guys are all familiar with, with Citrix and VDI and application delivery and how this works. And I had actually had some experience with these applications before. We had been playing around with some technologies and trying to get these things to work because they are, the hardest apps. We always want to try. We always want to try there to see how far we can push these things. And I heard this list of applications, and I was like, but we're problem solvers, and we sat down and we got to work to try to figure this out. Just a little bit how we went down the path. I mean, we started out with some traditional methods of doing this, like Citrix XenApp and terminal services, right? Very clearly, these applications were not going to work. They're far too graphics intensive to be able to do this. We then shifted over to a VDI model, which you actually have a VM of the Windows operating system. There's nothing shared. It's a one-to-one desktop, operating system. Install the applications on there. Again, performance, we just couldn't get it there. There was just these applications were designed to be run with an actual graphics card on an actual computer. Okay, so we tried some other things. I don't want to get too super technical or not, but as far as like emulating the GPU and thing like that, didn't work. There was some brand new technology out there that you could actually use pass through a GPU card, like an NVIDIA graphics card, the kind you would have in like a really high-end desktop. Put it in a server, pass that through to a virtual machine, and it's presented just like a graphics card to those desktops. Again, very early technology, but we were able to get that working. We were able to get that working, and to a point where I think the performance, everybody was very impressed with it. And then move forward with it from there.
So we help Devry build a state-of-the-art system that the students use. Can you explain, though, it's one thing to build it, it's another thing to maintain it. How did you, and what was part of your thought process for the team to operationalize the bleeding edge?
Well, the easy part is that the technology itself, okay, there's some pieces of the technology that are out there, right? The GPU pass-through and the things like that, and the server's required to do that. For RKON, it all fits into the way we do this. We're doing desktop as a service already with traditional methods. So as far as operationalizing it, there was a lot of pieces in there that played right in, right? It played right into our strengths, and we knew exactly how to run with it. Now, over the course of time, and this goes for all of our customers, not just necessarily Devry, but there were opportunities for us to build onto our skill set and our tool set as far as some things that we were experiencing in the Devry environment. Like I have one example. It was kind of a black eye for us, but we were experiencing some outages. And we were thinking it was a bug with certain technologies that we had with Citrix, and we were having these unacceptable outages. Any outage is unacceptable, but we got the team together, did some brainstorming. That's when we actually started integrating some other tools. We implemented Splunk into the environment. We were able to aggregate the logs of all of the different systems that we had, including these newer systems, and start to find some events that were precursors to the system going down. Tweaked our monitoring, tweaked our operational process, and haven't experienced any outages since. And since it actually turned out to be a bug, it was actually fixed when we were able to implement that. So
Todd Flesher at the time was part of the Devry team. He has since joined the good side. And he's not only a member, but he's a client as well.
Is that a hair club? Yeah.
And what I mean by that is he's actually a faculty member at Devry, so he teaches some courses. So, Todd, if you can give maybe the audience a little bit of an idea of what your experience was through this process, and from a student's eyes, faculty's eyes, like how did the new system kind of meet these new demands that you were seeing?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing was we were hosting internally the Adobe CS5 applications on XenApp, and we had tons of problems with it. It consistently crashed, it failed, students had a miserable experience. So the biggest thing going into the project and in meeting with RKON, when we met with Jeff and we met with Chris and Cameron and even in Jeff Malarkey, we said, this new system has to be better than you ever built any system before, because you're already running uphill against the fact that students were frustrated about their previous graphics experience. And the other thing that we were battling is the fact that every campus, even though they had limited IT resources, wanted to install everything locally because of the bad experience. So we also had to prove to campus faculty and IT staff this can work really, really well. And I think that was the biggest importance of selecting a partner in RKON that had proven out, done this stuff before, and as Chris mentioned, we're the problem solvers in figuring out. As a faculty member, and I teach online, and I teach architecture and operating systems, so the students in those classes are tech savvy. They know when things are good and when things aren't so good. So you really have to give them a quality environment. And that was an important piece of it. And it has to be the same experience regardless of where you are. So we couldn't just focus on saying, well, if we send everybody to one of our campuses, we could put in some WAN accelerators or something and make that super fast. That only covers the campus students. What about the students that are in remote areas? We have a very big military population. In fact, I have at least 10% of my students every session either in the military or ex-military and all over the world on maneuvers, whether they're in Kazakhstan or Germany. I had a student in Germany a couple sessions ago that sent pictures. They expect the experience to be just as good no matter where they are. So you can't just rely on saying, and I know Chris and I went toe-to-toe on this a couple times when I was still at DeVry. I said, you've got to make it a great experience, and we can't rely on what kind of bandwidth they have. So whatever you need to do to make that work as well as possible was the important piece of the puzzle for us.
And along those lines, I know DeVry does a lot of surveys and collects data. What were some of the survey results that you got back from the students and faculty, and how do those change from previous?
Yeah, so the results prior to the implementation were, you need to fix the lab, I'm paying a lot of money. Why do I pay so much money to have a crappy lab experience? You're a technical school. You should make good technical stuff. After we implemented, it was really nice to see. And what we also did, we targeted some of the what we call the more challenging faculty members, especially at campuses who like to have all their own stuff. And those were the people you had to win over. So we surveyed them first, and we said, we want your honest opinion about this new environment. And we got a lot of great feedback. A lot of them, even the detractors, surprisingly said, you know what? We really didn't think you could do it, but you pulled it off. And you gave an environment that students really like, they enjoy, and it gives them the ability to make their own choice, right? So some of your graphics students buy and load all their own software. Great. But for those that can't, for those that aren't sure how, for those that can't afford it, you gave them an environment that can work just like their own systems. In fact, in some cases, for some of the campuses that are still going through upgrade processes, there was actually feedback that this environment worked faster than using software locally on computers at their campus locations. So that was pretty nice to hear.
So I think this is the point, Chris, did you guys want to go through a little bit of a demo and show?
Certainly can be.
So unless, Deb, did you have any other thoughts that you wanted to to impose to the
The only thing I'd like to mention, I don't want to do a commercial here, but you know, one of the things I feel strongly about, and a lot of people want to do business with DeVry, we have a phenomenal footprint. We're in about 50 countries now, and our campuses are all over the world. And it's exceedingly important to choose the right partner to do this. A lot of people told us they could do this, but the amount of time that RKON took to spend with us and to really understand our students and what our students' requirements were, I think was very commendable, and obviously it ended up being a great relationship that we've created with them, and we're looking to them to do a lot of things for us in the future. And I just want to say thank you, because you guys have just done an incredible job. So
I appreciate that commercial.
Hi, my name is Ryan Wickberg. I was one of the engineers that was challenged to build this environment. This was very difficult and very challenging, but very rewarding. I worked one-on-one with Todd on working the bugs out, and like they said, the goal was a seamless user experience. So here we got right here we have an AutoCAD application running. This desktop is Windows 7 with a 1-to-1 GPU attached to it, and it's leveraging the GPU. Todd, if you want to roll around. In the right-hand panel, we have a little graph just measuring the GPU performance. Nothing too special, but this is very seamless for the user experience. That's all. That was our main focus.
Yeah, if I could just add in, I know this. It may not be the flashiest, demo or anything, just a ball bouncing, but what's actually happening there, and this is why these applications are so challenging, is that as that ball is being rotated, it's an actual 3D object, right? This isn't like just a video, where it's just a two-dimensional thing. That's an actual three-dimensional object If you can see that they can make this thing bounce and rotate and everything like that, that can't be done in, without a graphical processing unit, because the calculations that are required to be able to do that are far more than a regular CPU than a desktop can handle. And these graphics cards, they're really high-end processing units, and that's really the magic, so to speak, of what's happening there. I mean, this is incredibly intensive. Even just the spinning of the ball to what's happening. So not the greatest thing to look at, but if for the true geeks in the room, there's some serious stuff going on in the behind the scenes with that.
Yeah, so basically, with the new technology enabled to add a GPU attached to it, it kind of acts as a co-processor as well. So if you have an application with OpenCL capabilities, it can leverage that GPU. So in tangent, the servers we have in the data center and the horsepower we have behind it, it really does perform a lot better than any normal workstation.
Yeah,
So.
and just there's a couple other pieces also that I want to touch on, right? So I mentioned a lot about the graphics and the intensity that's going on there. There's also an actually these are very large files, and there's a lot of access to disk. We also upgraded our capabilities specifically for these Devry hosted desktops, where we actually got into instead of using traditional SANs with spinning disks, we're actually using solid state storage for this. We a partner of ours called Whiptail. We're using a solid state array for this. Again, these things are built for nothing but performance. Another thing, this. So I'm not going to lie. This isn't the cheapest cost model around, right? I mean, we have everything there. So that's one of the reasons why I was like, this is really hard and expensive. But yeah, so this isn't the cheapest cost model around. I mean, this is high horsepower. This is the Cadillac, right? This is maybe more like the Ferrari or the Lamborghini. But the advancements that are coming, we're working with NVIDIA and Citrix right now. And I know Ryan mentioned 1-to-1. That means there's one GPU and one actual physical card per user. That's one of the reasons why it's expensive. We have quite a large footprint in our data center because we can only put 2 or 3 users per server. So the next phase of this technology that's actually coming out within the next quarter or two is virtualized GPUs. So NVIDIA is coming out with these cards with much bigger processors, but they've figured out a way to actually virtualize the GPUs and the instruction sets that are, that these drivers hook up to be able to do this. So now instead of, 1-to-1, we're going to start looking at 8-to-1, 16-to-1, 32-to-1 type of scenarios. So, from a cost perspective, VDI as a service, or even VDI in your own data center, is actually going to start becoming a lot more. The user experience is going to become a lot better because it's almost getting to the point where we're going to be able to put a GPU attached to any VDI session, right? And if you look at user experience, you're always comparing to a laptop. Like the laptop on the table has a GPU, right? You go to VDI, it does not have a GPU, right? These do, but the technology is really close to the point where we're going to be able to do that as commonplace for any type of virtual desktop.
There's a question.
So just ballpark, how many GPUs are currently allocated to provide this service? We talking in the thousands?
Well, no. These are pooled desktops. So it's not one per student. It's there's a pool of desktops that we can use, and it's based on concurrency. And at this point, I think there's only 2 or 3 classes in there.
Yeah, so there's 30 concurrent desktops right now. So you've got 30 GPUs basically, one to each desktop.
Yeah, which is 3/4 of a rack in our
Serving
data. It's a lot.
3,000 students. So depending on their workload when they get to go in and do their homework, it varies. The biggest uses, of course, Sundays at 8 o'clock at night because homework's due by midnight.
Anyone else?
All right.
Is there any other questions that we have from anyone in the audience?
Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
Got one here. Mark.
Well, with that, I guess
Well, no.
we have one more.
No, actually, I don't need that. My question was, I understand that this is an educational application of this, as far as build out. How about something practical like pipeline full of oil or something like that? How do you use this type of technology to make that happen?
I think you could really do the same thing, right? So this is a 3D Studio Max application, but it's made by Autodesk. So the same group that makes AutoCAD, which would be those types of 3D modeling and some of the similar things we've seen even Boeing do with some of their technology around modeling jet engines and things like that. So it's very applicable that once you solve that GPU problem and once you solve making it smooth and making those transitions smooth, because you have to, if you're rotating around some kind of oil pipeline and you need to see exactly what it looks like, that's got to be smooth and seamless.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd also add to that is, so, I mean, in reality, we're not doing anything that you can't do with a, $3,000 desktop at a desk, right? But as we move to more and more of a mobile workforce, those guys want to get involved too. They don't have to come into the office just so they can have their big bad computer, right? So, I'm not saying get rid of the big bad computer in their office, but if they have files to work on and they have these simulations to run or things like that, this gives them the opportunity to to do it from home, do it from a coffee shop, do it from airport, things like that.
When you look at economies to scale,
If there's one more part to answer the first question. So the other part, I think what he was trying to ask for was there's an application rationalization process that we help the clients go through, right? So you're going to have different applications that have different back-end system requirements, and you can have a tiered VDI infrastructure that supports. So whether it's a student or whether you said in the oil field, right, when people come in and log in, based on how you classify those users and what groups you put them into, what kind of applications that they're going to need and have access to, and you can have different decision trees to set up so that way you're getting the right experience for that person at the right cost model, so that not 100% of the people are using the most expensive thing. You're like for the Devry, we have more VDI sessions set up. Some of those require the GPUs, so that's a subset, but the whole way we have structured it, and you go through an application rationalization process on the front end that dictates the design and architecture. So, sorry, go ahead.
so when you look at economies of scale, I mean, it's not just GPUs that you're saving money for management of, right? I mean, you've got your back-end storage, you've got bandwidth, you've got security infrastructure. So when you look at that compared to your old model, how much of a benefit, both financially and from a management perspective, do you think it would be?
It's huge. It is absolutely huge. The amount of manpower it takes to make sure that the system availability is up is just incredible. I would say Todd would probably have a better understanding of this, but I remember a time where it was just outage after outage after outage. And again, every single time a student cannot log into a class and get homework accomplished, we run the risk of losing a student. And to me, in 2013, how is that even possible for something not to work? So in terms of availability, I think we could have gone as much as 30% availability to 99% availability. So we have been able to keep our group very tight. And again, if you get the right partner to do this, it just is insurmountable what you can save.
I think the other big thing with that too, management. So centralized management over an environment, one place to do updates. You do it on a provisioning server. You let it push out to every machine you have. Refresh cycles. So imagine if you had to serve 100 plus locations with Devry has and have 100 plus computers per location, all that you'd have to refresh for the latest hardware, the latest GPU, the latest everything to make it run an application like this. That's what reduces your costs. The other real big thing, which I'm sure a lot of you experience, is licensing and licensing costs. Adobe especially. Adobe is awful about licensing, very expensive, and they don't like to virtualize. But in our case, we were able to save hundreds of thousands of dollars moving to a virtualized concurrent licensing model over having to license everything until Mark tells me to stop.